Hello students, I am teacher Svetlana and in our today's lecture we will learn about respiration, organs of respiratory exchange and the human respiratory system which is covered in the chapter Respiration and Circulation. Students, all living organisms require energy to carry out various life processes. The energy is stored in the body in the form of complex organic compounds, that is potential energy, and it is however not usable by the organisms unless it is converted into a usable form. Now this conversion is achieved through the process of respiration. So respiration, it is a biochemical process of oxidation of organic compounds in an orderly manner for the liberation of chemical energy in the form of ATP. Aware of the chemical equation, that is C6H12O6 plus 6O2, which gives you 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 molecules of water plus 38 ATP. For this, the process of gaseous exchange takes place between the organism and the environment. The site of gaseous exchange is called as the respiratory surfaces. Now students, let us have a look at the organs of respiratory exchange. Respiratory exchange is a simple physical process. For efficient gaseous exchange, the respiratory surfaces should have the following features. It should have a large surface area, it should be thin, highly vascular and permeable to allow exchange of gases. It should also be moist. Now let us have a look at how gaseous exchange occurs in plants. The shape and structure of plants facilitate gaseous exchange by diffusion. A terrestrial flowering plant has many air spaces between the cells of the stem, leaf and root. These air spaces are continuous. Oxygen diffuses into the air space through the stromata, that is the pores that are present on the leaves and young stems. Carbon dioxide and water vapor diffuses out here. Have a look at the image here. This is your leaf and this is the location which has these stromata embedded in it for gaseous exchange. It is the aerated soil. The oxygen dissolves in the film of moisture or water around the root tissues and it enters by diffusion. Woody flowering plants like trees and shrubs have an external impervious bark. Here, gaseous exchange occurs through small pores in the stem surface. Here, you can see these small pores in the surface of the stem here. These are called as lenticels. So, these are used for exchange of gases. Respiration in animals. As compared to plants, animals show wide variety of respiratory surfaces or organs. The respiratory surfaces differ in various animals. In animals, depending upon the complexity of the organization and the surrounding medium, certain parts of the body have become specialized into different types of respiratory organs. In the higher animals, the respiratory organs are also associated with the transport system. Have a look at this list here. It shows you the organisms, the habitat in which they are found and the respiratory surfaces or the organs that they show. You can pause the video for a while and have a look at this chart. Now students, let us have a look at the human respiratory system. The respiratory system brings about inspiration, expiration and exchange of gases in the lungs. These are then transported by the blood from the lungs to the different tissues and parts of the body. The respiratory system can be divided into an upper respiratory system having the external layers, the nasal cavity, internal layers, nasopharynx, nose, throat and the associated structure. So basically, have a look at the diagram here. This region, the upper part, is called as your upper respiratory system. The lower respiratory system refers to the larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles and the lungs. Here, have a look again. Here from the larynx onwards and below in the diagram, this region is your lower respiratory system. Now let us have a look at each of these parts in a bit more detail. The first part is your nose here. This is the nose here, which is having marked the nostril and the nasal cavity here. Now, the nose has a pair of slit-like openings called as external nares or nostrils for the entry of air into the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is divided into right and left nasal chamber by a mesenteroid cartilage. So here you have a cartilage which divides your nose into the right and left nasal chamber. Now, the nasal chamber is further divided into three regions. That is the vestibule. It is the proximal part above the nostril. So, just above your nostrils here, you have the vestibule. Its skin has hair for filtering the air and trapping the dust and suspended particles in the inhaled air. Then we have the respiratory part, which is the conditioner, the middle thin wall, highly vascular part for warming and moistening the inhaled air. That is, the inhaled air that we take in is warmed here. Then we have the olfactory or the sensory chamber. The upper part is lined by the olfactory epithelium for detection of smell. Then the next part we move to is the pharynx. This here you can see in the diagram is marked as your pharyngeal region. Now it is divided into three parts. The nasopharynx is the uppermost part from the nasal chamber. It leads into the orthopharynx, which is the common passage for food and air. This continues below as the laryngopharynx. So towards your nose, you have the nasopharynx. Towards your larynx, you have your laryngopharynx. Between the nasopharynx and the orthopharynx is the palate bone. The pharynx here have a set of lymphoid organs called as tonsils. The next part that we will see is your larynx, and that is marked here in the diagram. It is also called as the voice box. It is the part of the respiratory tract which contains vocal cords for producing sound. Voice is produced by the passage of air between the vocal cords and modulation created by the tongue, teeth, lips, and nasal cavity. The larynx open into the laryngopharynx through a slit-like opening called as glottis. This opening of the trachea or the windpipe is guarded by a leaf-like flap called as epiglottis. Here, so it prevents the entry of food into the trachea. Now, next part is the trachea, which is also called as the windpipe. It is a long tube 10 to 12 centimeters in length here, and it runs through the neck in front of the esophagus and extends into and up to the middle of the thoracic cavity. It is supported by C-shaped 16 to 20 rings of cartilage which prevent the collapse of trachea. So you will see here this trachea, it's made of ring-shaped cartilages. It is lined internally with ciliated epithelium and mucus glands that trap the unwanted particles, preventing their entry into the lungs. The next part that we are seeing is the bronchi. The trachea divides into right and left primary bronchi as it reaches the middle of the thoracic cavity. Here you can see the trachea and it gets divided. This is the right bronchi and then you have the left one towards the left side. The bronchi are supported internally by C-shaped incomplete rings of cartilage. The primary bronchi divides to form the secondary and the tertiary bronchi, which leads into the terminal bronchioles ending into the alveoli. So here if you have a closer look, you can see the trachea dividing into the primary bronchi and then into the secondary bronchi and finally into the tertiary, and the tertiary ends up into the forming the structure of your alveoli, which is this sac-like structure here. Have a look at this image. You can see the secondary and then the tertiary bronchus, and it ends into these sac-like structures which are your air sacs made up of your alveoli. Next part are your lungs. These are your pair of lungs. This is the right lung and this is the left lung we have. Then we have the alveoli. Alveoli or the alveolus is each alveolus is a grape-like structure, which are your air sacs. And then we have the diaphragm. This here is your diaphragm. It is a muscular septum that separates the thoracic and abdominal cavity. It is dome shaped and on contraction it becomes flattened. So now we will have a detailed look at about the structure of our lungs and the alveoli. Lungs, these are the main respiratory organs of humans. One pair of spongy and elastic lungs are present in the thoracic cavity. So this is your thoracic cavity and you have your lungs that are suspended there. Each lung is enclosed and protected by a double pleural membrane, the outer pharyngeal and the inner visceral membrane. So there are two protective layers that are present externally around your lungs. Between the two pleurals is a pleural cavity filled with a lubricating fluid called as pleural fluid. So you have the two pleuras where here you can see between them you have a fluid which is filled, which is called as your pleural fluid. It is secreted by the membranes. The right lung is larger and is divided into 3 lobes, while the left lung is smaller and is divided into 2 lobes. So these lungs are further divided into lobes. Here you have 3 lobes on your right side. You can see 1, 2, 3, and on your left side we just have 2 lobes, 1 and 2. Each lobes of the lung has the terminal bronchioles ending into a bunch of air sac, each with 10 to 12 alveoli. So again, I will show you, you have your trachea, which gets divided into your primary bronchi, then further into the secondary, and then finally into the tertiary, which end up into the alveoli. Students, let us get to know what is alveoli. These are thin-walled lobulated structures like a bunch of grapes. Have a look at this image here. You can see this is your alveoli and it appears like a bunch of grapes. Each alveolus is surrounded by a network of capillaries of pulmonary arteries and pulmonary veins. Here you can see here the arteries and the veins have completely covered the alveolus. These have highly elastic walls made up of single layer of squamous epithelium resting on the basement membrane of connective tissues. So these are highly elastic because they undergo the process of expansion and contraction during the process of breathing. There are about 700 million alveoli in the lungs and they provide the surface area for exchange of gases. Have a look at this image here. You can see the blood capillaries are surrounding the air sac and exchange of gases is taking place. CO2 is given out, O2 is taken in and it is taken by the red blood cells and it is circulated into our body. Thank you students for participating in this lecture. See you soon again with the next topic. Till then, take care, be safe and keep learning.